Most people think night shift jobs are quiet, peaceful even. A time when the world sleeps and you can get your work done without interruption. But sometimes that silence isn't empty. Sometimes it hides something far more disturbing. Tonight, we're going to hear 3 true stories from people who worked alone in the dead of night and experienced something they still can't explain. Our first story comes from a man who took a job as a night security guard at an abandoned hospital just outside his city. The building had been shut down for almost 20 years, but the property owners still hired guards to keep trespassers out. Most nights were incredibly boring. His job was to sit in a tiny security office, watch the cameras, and do a patrol through the dark, empty hallways every few hours. But one night, something happened that made him quit just 2 days later. The hospital had 5 floors and a basement. The basement used to hold storage rooms and the old morgue, but it had supposedly been sealed off for years, long before he started working there. Around 2:30 in the morning, he was watching the security monitors when something strange caught his eye. One of the cameras was pointed down a hallway in the basement. At first, he thought the camera was just glitching out. But as he watched, he saw what looked like a person walking slowly down the hall. He leaned closer to the monitor, trying to get a better look. The figure was tall and very thin, but there was something about the way it moved that felt completely wrong. It was almost like it was dragging one of its legs. He immediately grabbed his radio and called the other guard on duty, asking if he was down in the basement. The other guard replied that he was outside, doing a perimeter check of the building. That meant absolutely no one should have been down there. He kept his eyes glued to the camera. The figure eventually stopped directly in front of the lens, and then, slowly, it turned its head toward the camera. Even through the grainy, black and white footage, he could tell something was terribly wrong with its face. It looked pale, almost gray, and then the camera feed just cut out. Static. He sat there for a few seconds, his heart pounding, debating what to do. Part of his job was to investigate any unusual activity. So he grabbed his heavy flashlight and headed for the basement stairs. But when he got to the door, he remembered something important. The basement door had been chained shut since the day he started working there. He shined his flashlight at the door. The heavy chain was still there, wrapped around the handles, secured with a thick padlock. It was locked, exactly the same as it always was, which meant whatever he saw on that camera couldn't have come through that door. Whatever was moving in that hospital basement was never explained, and the security guard never went back to that job again. But sometimes the strangest experiences happen in places that are supposed to feel safe. Our next story comes from someone who worked the night shift at a small roadside hotel. A few years ago, I worked the graveyard shift at a little hotel just outside my city. It wasn't a big place, only 3 floors and maybe 30 rooms. Most nights were quiet. I would just sit behind the front desk, watch the security cameras, and occasionally check in a traveler who arrived late. One night, around 1:40 in the morning, the phone at the front desk rang. When I answered it, all I heard was breathing. Slow, heavy breathing on the other end of the line. I asked if someone needed help, but the line just went silent. After a few more seconds, the call disconnected. I checked the caller ID, and my stomach dropped when I saw that the call came from room 214. The strange part was, room 214 was empty. No one had checked into that room for at least 3 days. I figured maybe one of the cleaning staff had accidentally left the phone off the hook earlier in the day. Still, hotel policy said I had to go check it out. So, I grabbed the master key and headed upstairs. The hallway on the second floor was completely quiet and still. When I reached room 214, I noticed something immediately. The door was slightly open, just a few inches, but I clearly remembered locking that room myself earlier in the night during my floor check. I pushed the door open slowly, my heart starting to race. The room looked empty. The bed was perfectly made and all the lights were off. But then I saw a sliver of light coming from under the bathroom door. I walked toward it and pushed the door open. No one was inside, just a sink dripping slowly into the basin. I turned the light off and started walking back toward the hallway door, feeling a little relief. And that's when I heard it. The hotel phone ringing right behind me. I slowly turned around. The phone on the nightstand was lit up, ringing loudly in the silent room, and the little caller ID display said something that made my blood run cold. Front desk. To this day, the employee still doesn't know who or what placed that call from the empty room. But not every unsettling encounter happens inside a building. Sometimes they happen in the middle of nowhere, late at night, when you're all alone. Our final story comes from a long-haul truck driver who experienced something deeply disturbing at a quiet, deserted truck stop. My uncle worked as a long-haul trucker for nearly 20 years. One night, he stopped at a truck stop somewhere in the middle of Nevada around 3 a.m. The place was almost completely empty. Just a few other trucks parked for the night and a dimly lit diner that was already closed. He parked his rig and decided to get some sleep before continuing his drive in the morning. Before he climbed into the sleeper cabin in the back, he happened to notice someone standing near the edge of the parking lot. It was a man just standing there in the darkness, staring out at the road. My uncle thought it was a bit strange, but just assumed it was another driver stretching their legs. So he climbed into his truck and turned off the lights. About 10 minutes later, he glanced out his side mirror. The man was closer now. He was standing between the rows of parked trucks, still not moving, just watching. My uncle said something about the guy just felt wrong, like he had been standing there, completely motionless for a very long time. Eventually, my uncle got uncomfortable enough that he reached over and locked both of the truck's doors. Then he closed the curtain that separated the driver's seat from the sleeper cab and tried to get some sleep. But about 20 minutes later, he heard something, a light tapping sound. At first, he thought it might just be rain starting to fall. But the tapping continued. It was slow, deliberate, tap, tap. He slowly moved the curtain aside and looked toward the passenger side window, and what he saw made him freeze in terror. The man from the parking lot was standing right outside his truck, smiling and tapping his fingernail against the glass. But the worst part, the part that makes this story so chilling, was this. A semi-truck sits high off the ground. The window was nearly 10 feet up, which meant that man had somehow climbed up the side of the truck without making a single sound. If you enjoyed these true night shift horror stories, make sure to subscribe for more disturbing encounters and late-night mysteries. And remember, some of the most terrifying experiences happen when the rest of the world is asleep. Thanks for watching.